Okay, yeah, let's get started.
Join us in a space classroom with Dr. Dan and me. A lecture on all things Warhammer, and it's all for free. We'll talk all about things, the Emperor and more. Get your chalk and step up to the board.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're ready to step back into the space classroom because once again we have Dr. Dan with us. Hi, Dr. Dan.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for coming back. We had some really lovely comments in the last video.
We did. I saw them. It's fantastic.
Yes, all about phallocentricity in Warhammer. Check out the link. And a few people were asking about your academic qualifications, what it is you study. And I should kind of hasten to add here that you haven't got a PhD in Warhammer or anything like that, but you are an academic. And you're here because you're a fan and you love the universe too. But could you tell us a little bit about what you study?
Okay, well, I've kind of been I've been on a bit of a journey in terms of what I study. Really liked doing was looking at audiences. That was the thing I was really interested in. It was audiences for books, for movies. I was in audiences for music, all this kind of thing. That was my kind of passion that I started off with. I've sort of moved through a number of different academic disciplines in the process. And I kind of got sidetracked from that in the last few years. Like with when the pandemic happened, I think my interest in audiences then kind of led me into looking at audiences for misinformation.
Yes.
Yeah, so that kind of I sort of got sidetracked into researching very serious stuff for a while. But what I originally wanted to do, it was all about audiences for fiction. And for a while, I was also looking at audiences for video games as well, a particular kind of video game, and that sort of led me back to my kind of nerdy roots as a tabletop gamer. So it's a thing I'm starting to explore again professionally now.
Lovely. And I managed to entice, after a chance meeting at a board game cafe, I've enticed you onto my channel. Now,
Yes.
One of the things that we spoke about on our first meeting was our love of elves.
Mm-hmm.
So, and as you know, my dear friend Arbiter Ian just has no time for elves, doesn't really like them, doesn't see the point in them.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really delighted that I get to kind of come to you and you can tell me a bit about Eldar.
Okay.
So we've talked a little bit about this, and the title, we have put a little bit of a clickbaity title in for this video, but you're going to tell us a little bit about why the Eldar are the most grimdark faction. Is that correct? That's what we've got.
Yes, yeah, that's it. Yes.
Okay. And once again, we'll do the timed lecture bit. So if everyone sits back in your space desk chair, which is like one of those chairs where you go in and there's a little desk that flips up and down. Get your tablets out and your laser pencils, because Dr. Dan is going to give us 3 minutes of why the Eldar are the most grimdark faction. See if I can get this timer to work again. And we should all be able to see it on the screen. So,
yeah.
Wait.
Already started. Oh my God.
Okay, so we'll do a countdown. 3, 2, 1. Dr. Dan.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I want to say I kind of understand why a lot of people don't like elves, because they are sort of. I love elves, but I understand why a lot of people don't like them because they are sort of intrinsically annoying. They are because you look at even I'm digressing, but you look at even Tolkien's elves. I love Tolkien, but even Tolkien's elves are sort of annoying. They're this sort of Peter Perfect kind of. They are individually, elves are better than humans in every conceivable respect, and there is this sort of tendency to think of them as being kind of smug and superior and everything. But the thing about Tolkien sort of makes it work in his own way, but the way that it works in Warhammer, because it's all twisted in Grimdark, is the thing that all of the perfectness of the elves and how brilliant they were, and they really were, because like the whole reason why the Necrons went into hibernation for millions of years was because they knew they couldn't beat the Eldar. That's how great the Eldar were. All of that perfectness of the Eldar, all of that perfection, is past tense. Because the thing about the Eldar, the overwhelming thing about the Eldar in Warhammer 40k is that they messed up. They are a shadow of their former selves. They had it all. They had it all, and they threw it away. They lost everything, and it's all their own fault. It's like the story of the Garden of Eden, with Adam and Eve. But the thing is that Adam and Eve, at least they can blame it on the serpent for tempting them, and the Eldar don't even have that excuse. They were their own temptation. They tempted themselves. They succumbed to temptation, and as a result of that, everything was ruined. The enormous majority of the Eldar died. It was because the Eldar fell into decadence and corruption, and they devoted their lives to meaningless pleasure. They inadvertently created the Chaos God Slaanesh in the Warp, and when Slaanesh came into being, with his or her first breath, Slaanesh inhaled the souls of more than 99% of the Eldar in the galaxy. And not only this, Slaanesh didn't just eat the Eldar. Slaanesh also killed or ate most of their gods. And destroyed an entire, the entire, that massive warp rift, which has torn the Imperium in half. That's the Eldar's fault. They ruin things not just for themselves, but for everybody else, and they know. And this just fills every aspect of Eldar culture. Everything about the Eldar, it just bleeds regret, because they know that it's their fault. It's all on them. And their lives now are all about kind of just sort of surviving in the wreckage of what they destroyed.
Wow, thank you so much. Well, I mean, I didn't know half of that, so I've taken some notes. I'm in shock. So I knew that they'd made Slaanesh. We kind of got a whiff of that, what book was it in? Fulgrim that came to light. I didn't know the thing about the souls being inhaled, and I didn't know about the temptation. So, but I think that's. I mean, it's giving me an idea for another clickbaity title we could use. Warhammer 40k, the Grimdark is all the elves' fault. Discuss.
Ooh, yeah. So that would be one too. Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, because Ian has just neglected this part of my curriculum. I don't know, but did the elves have some gods called the Old Ones or something? Who were the elves? The Eldar.
Right, yeah, that's an interesting thing about the Eldar, because although the Eldar are very, very old, and as a species they are very, very old. They know a lot of things that humanity doesn't know. They're also very intelligent, and they because of their immense psychic abilities, they can see the future. They can see all sorts of things that other beings can't. So that they have this enormous knowledge, but their own understanding of the universe is quite superstitious. So, for example, the Eldar, the old ones the old ones literally created the Eldar. They created them as a sort of bioweapon, along with the orcs. Because I suppose the orcs would be better described as a bioweapon, but because the orcs are more like a disease, I guess. But the Eldar, they created them as warrior servants, and they were to be sort of psychic warrior servants. They're kind of Jedi-like force that was supposed to help the old ones. And that's the origin of the Eldar. They created the Eldar to be their sort of, like I said, they're sort of they're kind of Jedi warriors, and they created the orcs to be sort of more kind of brute force, kind of the equivalent of the Space Marines, only better, because they were in the old days when they were the Kree. But the Eldar actually believe that they are descended from this pantheon of gods that they have, which has got nothing to do with the old ones, and that's all sort of Eldar superstition.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they have this whole pantheon of gods, it's sort of, to me, I haven't really looked into this, and to me it sort of seems more like sort of like maybe Sumerian mythology or something like that. It's got that kind of feeling to it.
So you
And
mentioned that they
Mhm.
fell, but they weren't tempted.
Although they were tempted, but well, the thing is that the temptation came from themselves.
Oh, greediness.
Yeah, well, it's kind of their fatal flaw, because the thing about the Eldar is
I
that
need the
they
context also. You're going to have to
yeah,
fill me in on what the temptation was and how that.
right. Well,
Yeah.
the thing is, they're very unlike Tolkien's elves, let's say, because Tolkien's elves are very sort of good and pure and ethereal, and above all of our kind of
Mhm.
they're above all the sort of carnality of humans and all
Yeah.
of that. Whereas the Eldar in Warhammer 40k are they're more emotion. They are extremely emotional. They're more emotional than humans. They feel emotions very strongly, and they also feel sensations more strongly. Their perception is keener than ours,
Mhm.
and this gives them a sort of tendency towards excess. They tend to they get kind of they enjoy things too much, and they get over enthusiastic, and and this is about every aspect of their lives. So for example, there's always this danger with the Eldar warriors that they're going to go too far down the path of the warrior and get stuck on it and just be sort of
Mm.
consumed by their sort of warlike tendencies. And it was this sort of aspect of the Eldar there that it led them to be over millennia, when they were the uncontested um, greatest force in the galaxy, and they didn't have anyone to fight against
Yeah.
or anything to worry about, and they had this wonderful technology which was all it was like the Eldar technology is sort of it's somewhere between science and magic, because it involves the energies of the warp. Like they make things out of wraithbone, which is a sort of
Mhm.
crystallized warp energy, which they can manipulate with their minds. So they built this amazing civilization with wonderful technology and everything they needed. They didn't want for anything. There were no external threats that could seriously bother them.
Mhm.
And they over thousands and thousands of years, they drifted away from worshipping their gods, and the older gods are real. By the way, they actually did exist in the war
And
until
can you play them in a game? Probably.
sort of, because
Mm.
we'll have to get to that later on.
Yes.
But their gods were real, but they forgot about them and they stopped worshipping them, and
That
they just
never
devoted.
goes well in any mythology. It never goes well.
Yeah, they lost any sort of sense of purpose in their lives, and they just began to devote themselves to pleasure. Basically, there were these pleasure cults that formed, and these are sort of extreme forms of pleasure often. So they were. So they were sort of becoming sort of more and more sort of perverse and doing terrible things
Were they? Are
for
they
the
not?
sake of sensation.
Are they not affected by the warp the same way that the humans are? Because
Well,
normally we hear
Mhm.
that story of like they started going excess, they started, mucking about. It's because they've indulged too much in the warp. So does that come into play in their story?
Kind of, but the thing is that the Eldar are intrinsically psychic, so they are all Eldar are basically as psychic as sort of the most powerful human psych, as well, sort of normal. Obviously, not like the Emperor,
Yeah.
but in any someone who would be regarded as a very powerful psyker among humans is just normal for an Eldar. So they're all they're all like that.
Mm.
But the problem with them was that they were surrendering to emotion and sensation so much. And that is dangerous in the warp.
Mm.
It was their excess that was actually kind of accreting in the warp and producing this gathering force there, which became Slanesh.
Emotions are a bad thing in Warhammer. I'm learning.
Yeah, well, the thing with the Eldar is that their emotions are stronger than human emotions, and they are so there's always this danger that their emotions will run away with them, and they've had that I should say, although that this calamity sort of befell probably 99.9% of the Eldar species. There were some of them that escaped because they had sort of realized that things were not right. And those that escaped, what they did was they found various ways of sort of controlling themselves. Okay. So, like the first ones to realize that things were not as they should be, were the Exodites, and they
the ones who ride dinosaurs.
Yes.
Yay! I remember that from a book we read. I'm so happy that I remembered it.
Well, the thing with them was they saw they were Eldar who looked at the other Eldar around on the the Eldar homeworlds and saw them sort of sort of falling into this sort of pointless hedonistic existence. And they sort of said to themselves, "Well, we're going to go back to nature. We're going to
yeah."
Hey, so they travelled off far away from the Eldar homeworlds, off into the reaches of the galaxy, and they stayed at a sort of deliberately kind of primitive technological level and reconnected with nature and. They have their Exodite worlds, and they've been there and they survived because they were far enough away from when most Eldar were consumed. They were off somewhere else, so they survived. And then later on, there were other Eldar who. They sort of realised the same thing, that this is really not going well. Things are going to end badly.
Yeah, it's looking a bit messy. It's like that talk at the party when people have started vomiting.
Yes.
We go, lads.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah, and what they did instead of going to the other side of the galaxy and going back to nature, what they did was they built craft worlds, and craft worlds are like. They're void ships basically, but they're enormous. It's basically like a hive city in space.
Wow. Okay.
And they're all built. It's all built out of wraithbone, so it's all built out of this sort of psychoreactive
stuff.
Yes,
I think I love the elves.
Yeah, good.
Spaceships with trees inside.
They do have, because like they're sort of like floating hive cities. But whereas the hive cities in the Imperium are absolutely nightmarish, awful, polluted places, cramped conditions, and you've got underneath them, you've got these filthy tunnels ruled by feral gangs, etc. The Eldar craft worlds are beautiful places, and they have inside them they've got they've got trees and beautiful natural landscapes, and they have beautiful towers, and it's a sort of wonderful, or at least that most of them seem to be this kind of wonderful, almost utopian kind of places. I mean, like, I don't know if you've read the novel Eldar Prophecy.
No, I add it to my list.
Okay, that one describes a craft world which has gone off the rails. It was far away from all the others, and it's kind of turned into a sort of rather nightmarish, sort of parody, I suppose, of the craft world concept. But on the whole, they're sort of almost utopian. But the thing is, the only reason that they're able to maintain it like that is because they're all so freakishly disciplined. Because like their whole life is built around self-discipline. Because they are all they are constantly aware that the same thing that happened to 99.9% of the Eldar species could happen to them. So they always, because they are still, they still have these heightened senses, they still have these heightened emotions, they still have this tendency towards excess in whatever they do. So if they ever, so they have to live lives of like rigid iron discipline in order to keep themselves on the straight and narrow, to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And their whole lives are sort of built around not repeating the mistakes that most Eldar made, and trying. And there's this sort of long-term idea that maybe they'll be able to undo maybe they'll be able to undo the damage that was done.
Maybe they can put Slanesh back in the bottle.
Yes, so there are various sort of plans for that, which are quite tragic. Like, there was an idea, there was the belief of most of the Craftworld Eldar is that because they have when Eldar die in the past, what would happen is their soul would reincarnate, but it's like the soul would go off into the warp, and then it would come back into real, into the materium and inhabit another Eldar that had just been born. But now, what would happen if they just died was the soul would go off into the warp and be eaten by Slanesh.
Oh, so I don't like that at all.
Yeah.
Wait, what? So is this canon?
Yeah. This is canon. Yeah, absolutely. It's part of the whole concept of the Eldar. But they have a way. They have ways around this, or at least
Wait, can we have a moment? Daniel, I've been through so much on this journey. I thought we'd have a lovely chat about the elves. So, wow, they really are the most grimdark factions.
They are grimdark, but you
said at the very beginning it's all their own fault, which makes it even worse. So
yes, it does. I've been forgetting about the dark elves, the Drakari.
Yeah.
Which have now sort of become a separate species, but the Drakari are actually the remnants of the Eldar that didn't see the light and go off and go back to nature.
They went on to the after party.
Yes, they did. They kept on. Unfortunately for them, their bit of the after party, or their particular after party that they chose to hang out at, was protected from Slanesh because it was off in the webway.
And what's the webway again?
The webway is this kind of spaghetti-like mess of sort of tunnels between the materium and the immaterium, between real space and the warp.
Okay, got it.
That was created by the old ones, and that was how the old ones used to get around. The Eldar, that's also the way that the Eldar have always travelled around. They don't typically send their ships into the. I'm not sure if they ever did. Now they certainly can't, because if the Eldar sent a ship into the warp, it would just be eaten by Slanesh. So,
serious stuff.
Yes. So whether or not they had a choice in the past, which I'm not sure about, there was their main means of travel was the webway, and there are a lot of Eldar. Well, a certain proportion of Eldar took to spending the entire time in the webway, and because the webway is cut off from, sort of insulated from the warp, they were safe from Slanesh initially, and they have a city there called Komorra, and they've carried on in their old evil ways, except that they've got even worse.
God!
But the thing is that the Dark Eldar too are. I'm sure they wouldn't admit to feeling anything like regret, because that's not in there, and that's not their style. But they're also defined by the eras of Eldar past, because the Dark Eldar have had to give up on using psychic powers.
Okay, to stay out of trouble.
Yeah, because they don't want to attract Slanesh and demons into Komorra, and they have this. I don't want to go into the Dark Eldar because they're a different faction, but we'll
save that for another Doctor.
We'll save that one.
Okay.
But the thing with the Dark Eldar, they get eaten by Slanesh when they die. That's it. Whereas the other Eldar have ways around that.
Is one of the ways getting put into a robot body, like we read in Fulgrim?
What it is that the exodites, the ones that live on that have gone back to nature, they become part of the sort of world spirit where they are. So their souls kind of get glued to the world.
Okay.
Yes,
that's way more acceptable.
Yes, that's and the Craftworld Eldar, they have these special spirit stones, which are the tears of Isha. The Isha being their
I love this.
being their goddess. And the thing is that when they die, the soul will go into the spirit stone, and then if another Eldar is able to recover that, they can then carry it back to the craft world, and they add it to they sort of add it to the wraithbone structure of the craft world, and then that Eldar's soul, it's kept within the infinity circuit of the craft world, so they're all sort of preserved there. So then they don't disappear off into the warp and get eaten. They stay around there.
So is it a bit like in Westworld where the robots uploaded themselves? Have you seen Westworld, the new one?
This is a big failure of my education.
Okay, don't worry about Westworld. Is it like they upload themselves into a big spiritual database? Can they be accessed, or are they just? Is it like you die and come back as a tree kind of thing?
It's sort of it's sort of like it's a I'm trying to think. It's almost like they're haunting the craft world in a way.
Elf ghosts.
Yeah, but most of the
so it's a spirity kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a spirity kind of thing. They sort of haunt the craft world, and they the extent to which their individual personality will survive is it depends on various factors, but they kind of haunt the craft world, but in a sort of nice benign way. So yeah, getting back to this long-term plan for getting rid of Slanesh, there's this prophecy that when the last Eldar is dead and their soul has passed into, and all of the Eldar souls that are remaining are in these are kind of haunting the craft worlds, which are now uninhabited. When that happens, they will finally triumph over Slanesh.
That's quite a payoff, isn't it? You can have Slanesh and Eldar, or neither.
Yeah.
Okay. That's not going to happen, is it?
No. Then you've got another faction of you've got a new faction of Eldar called the Inari. And they've kind of got impatient, and they've decided they think it's possible to make that happen early.
Wow, this sounds dangerous.
Well, yes. Well, the thing is that the reason why the Eldar will finally triumph over Slanesh when they're all dead is because they believe that, just in the same way that through all those thousands of years of pleasure seeking and excess, they were inadvertently creating Slanesh in the warp. They believe that they are, well, in fact, they are. They have been by preserving their souls in this way.
Yeah,
they've been creating a new entity in the warp, which, like their other deities, is largely benign. So this is not another chaos god. This is the Eldar god of the dead, and they have been creating. The Eldar god of the dead has been kind of accreting in the warp because of
such a great word, accreting. I let you use it once before, and I thought I knew what it meant. Could you tell me? Do you remember when you told me how to pronounce that word on the chat as well?
Oh,
we're having one of those moments.
I'm so sorry.
No. I want to learn. This is why we have hired you. Accreting means?
So you've got something there, and little bits are kind of glomming onto it.
Yay! Okay, great.
So it's getting bigger because more and more bits are glomming onto it, basically.
Amazing.
And yes, and with Slanesh, this was all of the sort of selfish impulses of the decadent Eldar, and with the god of which eventually became sentient, and the Eldar god of the dead, Iniad, has not yet become sentient, and they believe that this will happen when they're all gone. But then you have this new faction of the Eldar who believe that they can awaken Iniad ahead of time, and in the end, will have the power to kill Slanesh. So they had this. They were going to do this big space ritual, and is that the name of a? Is that the name of a song, actually?
I don't know.
Is that the name of a Hawkwind song? I think that might be the name of a Hawkwind song.
Probably.
They were going to do this big
flute?
space ritual and bring Iniad to life, and it failed because the Space Marines stopped them. But it had the effect of creating an avatar of the God of the Dead. So then this has sort of changed the faction landscape of the Eldar. So there's you asked about whether you can play Eldar gods.
Yeah.
If you're playing these particular Eldar as a faction, then they can have an avatar of their god with them. And if you're playing regular Craftworld Eldar, one of the Eldar gods was called Cain, who's the Eldar god of war and murder.
Oh, that was always one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Cain was one of the Eldar gods that survived this big calamity. Sort of, but Cain survived by breaking himself into little bits and sending one of those little bits into each of the craft worlds.
So he unaccreted himself.
Yes, yeah.
Reverse accreted.
So every Eldar craft world has within it an avatar of Cain, the Eldar god.
Wow.
And those under special circumstances they will bring that, but they'll bring the avatar of Cain to life, and the avatar of Cain will accompany them on their will accompany them into battle and fight with them.
Nice.
But this is Warhammer, so it's very grimdark. In order to awaken the avatar of Cain, one of their leading warriors has to sacrifice
himself.
Yeah.
Herself. Yeah. Okay. Thought it might be that.
Yeah.
Thank God it's not little elflings or something. Even.
No. That's probably what the Drakari would do.
Yeah. There's always a payoff in the Grimdark. So I think what I'm realizing is, I thought I was doing really well by slowly learning about the Horus Heresy and how that unfolds and becomes 40,000. But it looks like there's just as much reading on the other side, if not more.
Well, actually, there's less, because it hasn't been the Eldar kind of lore hasn't been worked out to the same extent that the Space Marine stuff has. There are many fewer books written about them. It's just so you're kind of more kind of at liberty to make stuff up and kind of imagine it.
I mean, I think it makes sense, because when you think of Warhammer, it is the Space Marine that comes to mind. That's the iconic, and that's the reason many Warhammer fans want to play, because they want to be Space Marines.
Yeah.
So thank goodness that we even got elves squeaking in at all, really. I mean, and I know we have squats also.
Yes, Space Force. Yeah.
Yeah, but one of the things I hadn't really thought about very much was different armies and the ways they relate to the warp differently. So, for example, elves can't go anywhere near the warp, but they can go webways. So it's kind of like building out the universe for me. And so, with all this rich history, what is it personally that draws you to play Eldar?
It's the thing I was talking about. It's that. I mean, it's the way that they just bleed regret. I empathize with that so much.
Wow, let's get really deep here. So,
yeah,
is it something to do with they are regretting for this hereditary huge sin? Some of them may have been around for, because they live forever.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
But there is a slim chance that they can atone through.
Yeah.
Going the other way.
Yeah.
Through what? Sorry.
Through self-discipline. That's the
There we go. And so
Yeah.
is that how you live now? Is that like a reflected?
It's sort of, I think it reflects how I sort of approach life. Actually, it
Yeah.
does. Oh,
Well,
gosh.
I'm really.
I just admit it too.
Well, I kind of can mirror that a little bit, because I think when I was younger, I was very wayward and just
Right.
completely, everything was driven from ego and me, and I want this and I want that. And as I'm older, I do look back and think, I was such a brat. So a lot of my energy now is kind of understanding how miserable you can make other people feel through thoughtlessness, and just
Yeah.
trying to be generous and giving, because then that makes the whole world nicer. And that kind of might, I'm really loving those parallels. So you're not alone, Dr. Dan.
Yeah, it's. I'm glad. But yeah, they are, for me. They're a wonderful kind of metaphor for life. Actually, it's because it's life in.
Go on.
Well, life in the, it's all about kind of life in the modern world, in modern, at least in the West, where we've got all this abundance, and we can there's you can live this kind of it's frivolous, like consumerist life, because it's possible, and it's possible to, you don't have to worry about all the things that we did in the past, that our ancestors did. Like we think we're being we think we're being fantastically self-sufficient if we just sort of cook a meal ourselves, instead of
Right.
instead of getting a takeaway, or microwaving a ready meal or something, when in fact you cook something, and you are relying on there being electricity or gas which has come there, and you don't have to go and chop wood, and you don't have to go and dig up roots or kill animals or anything. So we've got this very easy life compared to what we did in the past. And and there's this, there is this sort of feeling of, a possible sense of sort of pointlessness to life. When we no longer have to struggle in the ways. I mean, obviously, life is still hard for many people, but we do not have to struggle in the ways that our ancestors did. And it's sort of finding meaning in that existence. And I think that, that to me, this sounds really silly, given that I'm talking about a tabletop war game, but to me, the Eldar, they sort of provided a sort of a metaphor for life in the modern world. And these two different ways of doing it. You've got you've got the craft world Eldar living their lives of discipline and following. They follow particular paths. They will follow a single path for a long time. They will they will be a warrior for a long time, and build up the skills of a warrior, and then they'll change track and maybe become a poet, and then they'll focus on writing poetry for years and years and years, or whatever. And that's how they live, and that's a way of finding meaning in life. And you've also got the Exodites who've gone off and sort of gone. Yeah, they've gone off grid. That's another option. And then, you've got the Harlequins as well. I didn't mention them. They're a very small kind of Eldar faction. They are they're sort of focused on the collective memory of the Eldar, because they retell the myths of the Eldar through performance. So they're little traveling theatre troupes that.
Oh my God, love.
Yeah, 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 and that's another way of finding meaning in life as well. Focus on remembering the past, understanding where we came from.
And creating music, song,
creating art. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this is why I love having you on my channel, Dr. Dan. Been on this journey together. No, thank you so much. I really do appreciate you. We'll have to come up with another topic. I think actually in the comments of our last conversation, people were requesting that you talk about various things.
Oh gosh.
So I mean,
live up to expectations.
Well, we're giving you a work list, but if you do see anything in the comments that you would like to pick up, we should do that. And also, everybody watching, if you have anything you'd like to ask Dr. Dan to have a look at, and we can have an academic chat. But we are both just fans; we're not specialists.
Yeah.
That would be lovely. And yeah, thank you so much for another fantastic conversation, Dr. Dan.
My pleasure.
So hopefully we'll see you again soon.
I hope so too. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, I hope you all enjoyed that. I'm so lucky to have people like Dr. Dan coming on my channel, and also huge thank you as usual to Louis Humanoid for the amazing soundtrack, which I sing over for the theme songs on my channel. If you've enjoyed, there are lots of ways you can support the foolishness that goes on the Mirror Manga channel. I have a Patreon, I also have a YouTube membership, so if you'd like to support, you can join those things. Otherwise, just please keep watching the videos and like and subscribe and leaving the lovely comments. It's a great journey to be on. I appreciate having some amazingly cool, lovely people who are joining me on this journey. Today's tarot card was the Knight of Swords. Yeah, seems strangely appropriate for my channel.